I have had my time of thinking Dickens, talking Dickens, and writing Dickens, as we all had who lived in the days of the mighty magician. I fancy the readers who have come to him since he ceased to fill the world with his influence can have little notion how great it was. In that time he colored the parlance of the English-speaking race, and formed upon himself every minor talent attempting fiction. While his glamour lasted, it was no more possible for a young novelist to escape writing Dickens than it was for a young poet to escape writing Tennyson. I admired other authors more. I loved them more. But when it came to a question of trying to do something in fiction, I was compelled, as by a law of nature, to do it at least partially in his way. All the while that he held me so fast by his potent charm, I was aware that it was very rough magic now and again, but I could not assert my sense of this against him in matters of character and structure. To these I gave in helplessly. Their very grotesqueness was proof of their divine origin, and I bowed to the crudest manifestations of his genius in these kinds, as if they were revelations not to be doubted without sacrilege. But in certain small matters, as it were of ritual, I suffered myself to think, and I remember boldly speaking my mind about his style, which I thought bad. I spoke it even to the quaint character whom I borrowed his books from, and who might almost have come out of his books. He lived in Dickens in a measure that I have never known another to do, and my contumely must have brought him a pang that was truly a personal grief. He forgave it, no doubt because I bowed in the Dickens worship without question on all other points. He was then a man well on toward 50, and he had come to America early in life, and lived in our village many years, without casting one of his English prejudices, or ceasing to be of a contrary opinion on every question, political, religious, and social. He had no fixed belief, but he went to the service of his church whenever it was held among us, and he revered the Book of Common Prayer, while he disputed the authority of the Bible with all comers. He had become a citizen, but he despised democracy, and achieved a hardy consistency only by voting with the pro-slavery party upon all measures friendly to the institution which he considered the scandal and reproach of the American name. From a heart tender to all, he liked to say wanton, savage, and cynical things, but he bore no malice if you gainsayed him. I know nothing of his origin, except the fact of his being an Englishman, and what his first calling had been, but he had evolved among us from a house painter to an organ builder, and he had a passionate love of music. He built his organs from the ground up, and made every part of them with his own hands. I believe they were very good, and at any rate the churches in the country about took them from him as fast as he could make them. He had one in his own house, and it was fine to see him as he sat before it, with his long, tremulous hands outstretched to the keys, his noble head thrown back, and his sensitive face lifted in rapture of his music. He was a rarely intelligent creature, and an artist in every fibre, and if you did not quarrel with his manifold perversities, he was a delightful companion. I fell much to him for society, and we took long, rambling walks together, or sat on the stoop before his door, or lounged over the books in the drugstore, and talked evermore of literature. He must have been nearly 3 times my age, but that did not matter. We met in the equality of the ideal world, where there is neither old nor young, any more than there is rich or poor. He had read a great deal, but of all he had read he liked Dickens best, and was always coming back to him with affection, whenever the talk strayed. He could not make me out when I criticized the style of Dickens, and when I praised Thackeray's style to the disadvantage of Dickens's, he could only accuse me of a sort of aesthetic snobbishness in my preference. Dickens, he said, was for the million, and Thackeray was for the upper 10,000. His view amused me at the time, and yet I am not sure that it was altogether mistaken. There is certainly a property in Thackeray that somehow flatters the reader into the belief that he is better than other people. I do not mean to say that this is why I thought him a finer writer than Dickens, but I will own that it was probably one of the reasons why I liked him better. If I appreciated him so fully as I felt, I must be of a finer porcelain than the earthen pots, which were not aware of any particular difference in the various liquors poured into them. In Dickens, the virtue of his social defect is that he never appeals to the principle which sniffs in his reader. The base of his work is the whole breadth and depth of humanity itself. It is helplessly elemental, but it is not the less grandly so, and if it deals with the simpler manifestations of character affected by the interests and the passions rather than the tastes and preferences, it certainly deals with the larger moods through them. I do not know that in the whole range of his work he once suffers us to feel our superiority to a fellow creature through any social accident, or except for some moral cause. This makes him very fit reading for a boy, and I should say that a boy could get only good from him. His view of the world and of society, though it was very little philosophized, was instinctively sane and reasonable, even when it was most impossible.